love that music. Hi, and welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and as you saw in our introduction, we are going to be discussing the organization Sahili and how they help empowering women, or help to empower women. But before we begin, as you know, I always have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. We are not live this evening, so unfortunately, you will not be able to speak to our wonderful guests. However, you can email them, or in this case, you can email me at talk@bcattv.org. If you have a question or suggestion for a future topic, I would love to hear from you. And for a crew this evening, we have Chris Flaherty, who's a staff member here, who's keeping us running even though my former crew graduated. So hoping to find a new regular crew soon, so stay tuned for that. And I would also like to thank my husband, Paul, for staying home for Daddy Date Night. Hopefully all homework is done and you and the kids are enjoying Lord of the Rings audio style. Love it. So, with that in mind, I would like to introduce my wonderful guests for this evening. Divya Chaturvedi?
Yes.
Yes, screwed that up. And Renu Tewarie.
Yes, that's
so.
true.
Renu and Divya are both co-executive directors of Sahili, which is actually an organization right here in Burlington.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us here.
So, I like to start each show kind of getting to know my guests and allowing the audience to get to know the guests a little bit. So, I will let you guys decide who goes first. But if you could tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you grew up, how you came to the Burlington area, and what made you decide to work with Sahili.
I can go first. I was raised in India and moved to this country after I got married for further education. I did a master's in public administration. Worked in the non-profit sector, moved around a whole lot, back to India, different countries, back to the US, and different states. I've lived in almost 4 different states.
Wow.
My field has been non-profit management and international development with emphasis on empowering women. And in my work in different areas with different organizations, the focus has been how to empower women through, savings account, through microfinance loans, engendering leadership development in women, especially women in management in the nonprofit sector, doing research on women. So it's been a varied and a very rewarding career. We moved to Massachusetts a few years back. I learned of Saheli because of my previous work, and I was a volunteer at Saheli for more than a year.
Wow.
And I got to know this wonderful organization and the real impact they were having on women right here in Massachusetts, women who had no other resource, and I really wanted to be part of this organization. So I'm really fortunate to be the co-ED at Saheli and to lead this organization to new growth.
I love happy stories. That sounds great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, it's about me. Like Divya, I'm coming from India. So I studied in India. I lived in Europe actually before coming here. So lived in Holland, then in Switzerland, then in Germany, then came here. So it's a long journey.
Wow.
So yeah.
You guys are such world travelers. This is cool.
So, and I always wanted to do something which helped others. And so I came across Sahili 12 years ago, and I started learning more about it. And I did the DV training actually that made me feel this is a place where I want to be. And that's where I started, and I'm now here and a co-executive director here.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So let's, before we get into what you are doing now, can you tell me a little bit about Sahili, the organization? You said you found out about it 12 years ago. How long has it been around? And, how was it established, and, why was it established?
So it is established for 25 years. This is the year we are celebrating 25 years. And I think the 2 of them, right? We had like Gauri and Usha, who's our co-founders. They were the one who started this organization. And I think they started because there were some demand needs of the women who needed help for the domestic violence, what was going on, you know, back home or somewhere. They were here and they needed help. So they thought of putting an organization for them. And then it started very small. And then we are here today.
25 years. Wow, that's awesome. So, you know, Divya mentioned like financial planning and financial management. Is it all financial, or, you know, I kind of want to back up again, because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I know that the two of you really work hard in helping women escape that cycle of domestic violence and help escape, get away from harm, and give them the power to realize that they can move on. So can we talk a little bit more about the domestic violence side of things and then move on to happier topics?
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
So, you know, it's an important question. You know, the reason we exist, and we started 25 years ago, because there was domestic violence that was happening in immigrant communities, right? So for people who had immigrated to this country from South Asia, from Middle East, you know, were trying to make a new life. You know, there was this stress of fitting in, of you know, fitting into the culture. There was often financial stress. There was immigration stress, and you know, and there was the cultural norms and practices that you know, that may you know, have led to domestic abuse, but they did not have access to culturally competent services, meaning that if they were seeking services for domestic violence, there were people, they could go to organizations, but those people were not understanding their culture, where they're coming from, you know, the options that would be more suitable for them given their immigration status, you know, the immigrant status. So Sahili started as an offshoot of another association because there was a need, and domestic violence, and there was a recognition that domestic violence is a pattern and repeated behavior. So it's about power and control, right? Okay. And that's a definition all domestic violence agencies use. Domestic violence is about power and control, where one intimate family member in our community, in South Asian community, it's actually extended family members. So there are multiple.
So that's where the cultural.
So there are multiple perpetrators of violence, and it's about, you know, about maintaining power and control over another individual. So, and it's a pattern behavior, it's a repeated behavior, and it often escalates. So with that, you know, with you know, and we can talk about the cycle of abuse, where you know, you experience abuse, there's an explosion, and then there's a repentance period, which we call honeymoon, and then the tension building phase starts, and you're kind of walking on eggshells, and you don't know there's going to be an imminent threat of explosion, and you're scared of that, and you try and avoid anything and everything to bring that on, right? And then there's an explosion, and that's the pattern that keeps on happening, repeating and escalating. So for and not many people are aware of this, right? Because if you talk to any person who's been fortunate to not have seen this or experienced this, you know, domestic violence are those often reported stories of physical violence, right? You know, there's a homicide, unfortunately, or if someone has hit someone, you know, there's physical violence. You know, celebrities, you know, they associate domestic violence with those kind of incidents. Physical. And what they are not associating is the insidious nature of abuse and what it does to a person, because you lose your sense of self.
Psychological impact as well.
Emotional abuse.
So emotional abuse, exactly.
Exactly. So there is that emotional abuse, psychological abuse, you know, there is sexual abuse, and for immigrants, there's immigration abuse. So for example, you are here on a dependent visa with your husband. He renews his visa, forgets to renew yours, and you become undocumented, and now he's holding it as a threat to make you do what you want, because now suddenly you're undocumented. Or he's not revealing that, you know, he's not filed for your green card, or he's not revealing to you your immigration status. He has all the papers, is not telling you. So there is that immigration abuse that happens. So October is celebrated as the Domestic Violence Awareness Month throughout the nation. And it is an opportunity for all the domestic violence organizations to really not only educate the public and to raise awareness about this thing that is happening. And domestic violence happens in almost in every community. And it happens regardless of your wealth status, your education, your upbringing, your ethnic background. It doesn't, that's one thing that does not discriminate. So it happens in every community. The statistic, that everyone quotes is 1 out of 4 women will experience domestic violence, right?
Okay.
And
that as an adult?
As an adult.
Okay.
And then it takes up to 7 to 11 years for a woman to really walk out of an abusive relationship. So those are some of the national statistics. There are very few statistics and data on immigrant women in the US. So it's hard to find.
Well, because women are afraid to report it, probably, because they don't want to have their immigration status
get
threatened.
into problem. Yes, because they don't have any citizenship yet. So if they go for abuse, then they might lose their status.
Would that really happen, or is that just a fear
No, it
Oh,
happens. They are sometimes, if it is a criminal case, then husband is deported.
Oh.
So that happens.
Okay.
And the unfortunate part is that if you have US born children, and if you get undocumented or you get deported, there is no way for you to come back and see your children. And that fear of losing children is what drives these women either to stay in abusive relationships or to do whatever it takes to kind of stay here. And that's where Sahili comes in, and that's where our domestic violence awareness comes in, because not many people are aware of what really goes on, or what domestic violence and how they can help. In their community, their neighbors, people they know. And our goal with Domestic Violence Awareness Month is to raise awareness in Burlington, in different populations about what is domestic violence, how you can help, and we hope to culminate the domestic violence awareness, our events, with a 5K walk that we are planning on October 23rd.
Okay.
And I know Renu can talk more about.
Let's talk about that. Let's
it.
talk about that walk right now. Now, is it taking place in Burlington,
It's
or is
in
it
Burlington.
like a greater Boston thing?
No, we are doing in the walk here in Burlington. So it starts from the town common, and then we walk for 5K together. It's more like wearing awareness. It's like walking together as a community. Against
is
this.
it also a fundraiser as well?
So we have like only registration fee that's for $25. This is more towards awareness, because we want people to know and come along and stand with us to to stop the domestic violence.
So how would someone figure out how to participate in that?
So we are going to put the flyers everywhere, and our website and on media we will be posting everywhere to come and walk with us, and and be registered there.
Okay, so October 23rd, that's coming up real soon.
Yes, that's coming.
It's like 4 or 5 weeks away.
Yes, and before that we are also having some programs and events in the library. So that's like it's a Purple Thursdays, so that we have booked library for 7th and 14th and 21st. That's the book, we have booked the library. We're having different events on that day, so we want all the community to come and join us.
What are some of the events?
So some of the event is like know your neighbors. So because we live now it's a global country, like we coming from different backgrounds, it's better to know each other and what culture we stand for, and because many times we don't know each other well, and we think it in our mind, cliche minds works with like this person is this and that. So it's better that to come and know each other.
Kind of break down those stereotypes.
Exactly. So that's something we are planning to do.
Is it just like a meet and greet type
Meet and greet something, come and meet and greet, and then people will talk about different cultures there, and if somebody is coming from different, like we can talk about some cultures we are coming from, then we can talk, and others are more welcome to come and talk along with us.
Now, is it just like the South Asian cultures, or is
no,
it
we are
like
open to everybody, everybody, because that we want everybody, the Burlington community. It's like more that.
Now, statistically, and I'm sure Divya might be able to address this a little better, how prevalent is domestic violence for the South Asian community within Burlington, and how does that kind of compare with the rest of the country or even the rest of Massachusetts?
That's a really interesting question, and going back to what I said earlier, there are very few studies done focusing primarily on immigrant population. So for South Asian population, there have been a few studies, but they would, either they are state-based or they would be for national.
Okay.
There are very few studies specifically for one one city.
Okay.
But Burlington has a big
Because Burlington seems to be very
has a big-
diverse and a very high, South Asian population as well.
Yes. Yes.
It does.
It
So it
does.
has a big South Asian population, and from the studies, from the top of my head, depending on the sample size and who has done the study, it shows a domestic violence range from 30% to almost 60%, which means that 1/3 of the women or even half of the women would be experiencing some or the other kind of domestic violence. But again, these studies are sometimes with very small sample sizes.
Okay.
Sometimes, they are qualitative studies, which is another thing we need to push for, right? We need more, education and more studies on domestic violence and how they impact different communities, so that we can come up with better answers
Okay.
in response to the need of those communities.
You can't fix it if you don't know exactly how
Exactly.
it's broken.
So most of the people are like, when we talk about immigrants, it's not only about having a visa problem, it's also the language. Even not knowing the language doesn't help, because that's the reason why we are needed so much, because
Okay.
the language is a big barrier. And secondly, not knowing the system also, how the system works here.
I don't think
Because-
anybody knows the system.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, back home, it's not the same.
Okay.
Because we don't have any DCF or Department of Children and
Right,
Family,
right,
and
okay.
or having how the police works. It's entirely different. So anybody who's here and they haven't domestic violence, they always think how it happens in the back home. So these things are going to take place. So
Okay.
it is. That's why Divya said it's very important to bring the awareness. The things are there. We are here. We can educate people, and then things are different here, and
Okay.
this we do not take for granted. Like system is there
Okay.
to help the women.
And this is exactly how it can help
How it
you.
can help you.
I just want to add to that, that's the language barrier is the big, one of the big challenges for immigrant population. But, Renu raised a very important point. For many of the people who are coming from, South Asian countries, from Middle East, Northern Africa, there is no system, for many of them, there's no system of restraining order against your abuser. Even if you're married to him or not married to him, there is no such system. So for them, when they come here, they don't know that there is a way out of this domestic abuse, and they continue to stay in abusive relationships precisely because they don't know,
Well, it's the whole power
information.
struggle thing,
Exactly.
too.
Exactly.
So and so when they come to Saheli, many times it's because of the child has complained, or the neighbor has called the police, or they have reached the end of their they're bearing
Like-
this abuse and they have called the police themselves. And our goal, of course, is to educate the South Asian community also that that you can walk out of an abusive relationship, because no one deserves a life of abuse.
Yeah.
And then at Saheli, we can help you access some of the resources and help that you need.
Because another fear, and I know we've kind of touched upon this, but in order to gain the courage to leave, you need to know where you can go.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, what are some of the resources that you can inform these women about, where if I go, where am I going to live? And how do I gain that financial independence if I can't get a job or whatever? I mean, what would you advise someone in?
Oh, that's like a
Yeah, I
it's
know.
like a huge question. It's like so, because to get money, or because for immigrant women is a much more difficult part, because as you said, the work permit is not there, so they might not be
Okay.
able to work. So it really then it becomes another challenge, how we are going to find some job which they don't, like babysitting or something, which it's like can be done without the permit.
Okay.
But
What about like housing? Let's start with the big housing.
The same here. If you are not a citizen, you don't have a green card, you don't get any housing. So then then we have to go to the shelter homes that is available. But because of the COVID, the shelters were not available, not so many. So we were working on putting them in a hotel somewhere for a few days till we could find something for them to go into the shelter home, because the shelter is the only answer at that moment.
Okay, and a lot of times, do these women have children with them?
Yes, and that is another big problem, because if you have children, then finding a shelter with a children one, because normally you will find a shelter for one person, but having a room for where you can stay with your children, it is complicated.
It's a lot harder.
And then how old is your children? If they are above this age, they can't go to the shelter home. So we had many clients where the children were older and then they could not go to the shelter homes. So then, we have supported them paying the rent for them.
Okay. And many shelter homes, for many women, they don't want to go because they don't have access to their food.
Yes.
And, to places to pray. And they feel very out of place. And in fact, some of our limited English speaking, survivors who were in shelter did not get as much help as they should have because of this. And that is why Saheli, we have been focusing on building our housing program, in getting, access to funding, in supporting survivors for a longer period of time. And I do want to share, 2 survivors' success stories, because, that's what makes
I love happy stories.
That makes our work meaningful.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
We supported. We had one survivor who was in an abusive relationship and did not have the courage to move out, because she said, I can manage everything else, but if I cannot pay Massachusetts rent, and if I don't have a safe place over my head, how do I move out? And she was very miserable. We tried to shelter and everything, but it wasn't working out for her. Finally, we did find her affordable housing, and we said we would pay her rent for 1 full year, so she could support herself, build up her savings if she had a job, and and then start leading an empowered life. And she jumped at it because she had been looking for ways to get out of her abusive relationship. So as soon as we were able to arrange all of this for her, she got out, got a restraining order, managed to find a job, with our help. She worked so hard at it, with us in getting a job, did everything, admission to school, all of those things she did on her own, because she had a new lease of life, so to say. And really, for the first time in many years, her home was a safe place for her. She had never had that experience. And we had similar situation with another client we supported through a housing program for a year. We got her affordable housing. For her, she had no option of going back, because she knew there was threat to her life. There was no way she could have gone back to her home country with her children. So she had to stay here, fight it out. By supporting her for 1 year, by helping her get access to her, employment authorization, she was in a good position. For the first time, she was working. Between Renu and I, when she came to the office, wearing new set of clothes to go for her first day of job. She came to our office first, so she could meet us and thank us, and really that is what makes this work so meaningful for us. Because we knew that we had effected change not only in their personal life at this point in time, but we had made change to their children and for the future. We had given hope to 2 women who could then start planning for their future.
They had about.
Yeah, the daughters.
Exactly.
Yeah, the daughter, because she had, the daughters, they also learned to live without any abuse in the house. Because children are most affected if there is an abuse in the house. So the child also learns to live without an abuse, and she can be just a normal child.
Right.
Otherwise,
well, it's their normal situation, so they don't know anything else. So that, like you had mentioned earlier, just perpetuates the cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Now, in these 2 success stories, did they reach out to Sahili right at the beginning, and you were able to, let them know that, oh, yes, you can get a restraining order, or did they kind of do their independent research and then say, I want to do this, but how?
So they called our helpline.
Okay.
But it takes time because they were not ready yet, because they were in that position, because it's very difficult. It's not that easy just to you say like, okay, I close a chapter and I start new one.
Right.
It's very hard leaving your husband, especially when you're in a different country.
Right.
So it took time. So we never push anybody till they are ready in themselves. So it took time, though we gave all the resources we could till she was ready. And then she said, yes, I want to move out. Then, you know, she took the restraining order and then she moved out.
Okay.
It took some time.
So, Renu, do you want to talk about then how you do, we do safety planning and then we invite them for our support groups?
So
Stuff
sure.
that I don't know about.
No,
Gratefully, thankfully.
So anybody who calls our helpline, we go with the safety planning. So safety planning is normally depends from person to person, what danger they are going through.
Okay.
And what all the resources they can, and how, with whom, if something happens, whom to call, where should they go, how should they keep their documents, important documents safe.
Okay.
So all those things, we start putting the safety planning according.
Would they have access? What happens if they don't have access to those important documents?
So that thing happens many times. That happens. So it depends what they have. That moment, that the question would be what you have and what you don't have. So when we take the restraining order, we'll tell the police people, they will get it for us. So we do that sometimes, because we start putting everything in paper, what she has with her, what she doesn't have. So we normally try to get it with the police, and later or a lawyer can ask them to provide that thing. But still, you know, because she doesn't have money, as Divya said, they don't have any means of getting finance because they're dependent on their husband. So that is the biggest challenge, how they can have a money. So I keep telling, when you go to buy something, save the money, like $2, $3, start saving money, because if emergency comes, if you have to call a taxi, or you have to call a person, somebody to call that you need a money, because even the phones are checked by the husband, because he's paying for it, right?
Yeah.
He can check those things. So how to have a phone for yourself.
And abusers a lot of times have that control, so they manipulate.
Yes, exactly. That's the biggest abuse, because isolation is the biggest abuse, because we don't have a family here. The only thing is we can talk back home, and then if that phone is taken away, then nothing is there, because they don't know the language.
And you're also halfway around the world, so there's really nothing physical that you can do.
So that becomes complicated. So we always try to see, like, if we can provide them the different phone numbers, or we use different apps where they can reach us. So we give all those safety planning happens that time. So we keep changing our safety planning every time, because things have changed in the home.
Okay.
So the safety planning keeps changing.
Well, because you want to be untraceable from the abuser.
Yes. So are you sharing your location with your husband? Sometimes they do. Is the cameras in the house? So is he recording something? So all those things we do talk about, and if it is, so it becomes complicated for them, because it
becomes complicated for you too, because you have to work your way around all of these,
all the time,
you know, hidden tricks and
all the time.
So what time frame are we looking at to develop the safety plan? Is it a matter of weeks, a matter of months?
So I do nearly. So it depends on how many time I can talk to the person. If we are talking like every day, then I ask if the conditions have changed or not. If something has changed, okay, if this happens, what happens? Because if you come from different countries, as we just spoke about, so people don't know how the system works here. Even the domestic violence is different. So it's very normal if somebody has slapped. So I have to ask, like, really, domestic violence, what did he do? Did he put his hands on your neck? Oh, that's normal. No, that's not normal. No. So, you know, so those things we have to educate every time. What is domestic violence? What he should do that you pick up your phone and say, like, this is enough for me. So we have to educate, this is not right, this is right. So, so this is another, because domestic violence for many people are different in different things.
Yeah, it's very subjective.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. So even for isolation is one of the biggest for our immigrant community. Because they can't reach out to their families, and they're isolated totally because of the language barrier, not knowing the system here. So they are already isolated.
And it just kind of digs them deeper into. Wow.
Actually, I quickly wanted to add to that, and that is why we kind of have a process map where you asked about how much time it takes. So it's very individual dependent, right? So it depends on how much intervention they need, and how much danger they're in, how much intervention they need, and what kind of supports do they need. So if they have citizenship, for example, or if they speak English, they need access to resources, but they need little support in terms of language translation, or kind of holding the hand through the processes, right? Okay. So every survivor who reaches out for help, there's literally an individualized plan for her, where she's at, what she's ready for, and then how we can support the survivor. So what are the things we can, do we need to talk to Department of Children and Families for her? Do we need to go to the police station with her? Does she need an affidavit? But what we offer to all survivors is an access to our legal program, which is free bi-weekly legal consultation by a seasoned family law attorney. They get one-on-one consultation. It's free consultation with the attorney, where the attorney will listen to their case and kind of guide them as to next steps. Do they need, another attorney? Do they need to file this? Basically kind of a path forward for them. We invite them to our support groups, which we and even in midst of COVID, we were running virtual support groups because they are so needed.
Can they get into the support group?
Depends.
Yes.
Okay. Depends where were they. So some of them are living with abusers, so we could not give them the access.
Right. Okay.
That becomes a little difficult. So if they were alone, they were separated, then yes, they had taken a RO, then they were living. So it became complicated with the people who were living. We could not provide that.
Sounds very
much.
individualized.
So we offer support groups. We offer, group therapy for survivors who are really, all of them are going through trauma. And then we offer them our housing, assistance. Sometimes if we were fortunate to get a shout out to Salehi and for helping us with our housing, we can support them through rental and utility assistance. For many, it's small payments or financial assistance to housing, and finding them affordable housing. That's something we do. And then, you asked about how do they get back on the feet. So it's a whole cycle where they are at the situation. Do they need a work authorization? If they don't, what are their options? For immigration, if let's say they're undocumented or they're dependent, what are their options for to live in this country? And through the Violence Against Women Act, there's a category called U visa, which as a DV survivor, an immigrant DV survivor, you can apply for. Which there's a horrendous backup, and it takes years to come, but it gives you, legal status to stay in the country. It gives you work authorization. So that's for immigration purposes, that's the only way in, to live, to stay long term. And for economic empowerment, we connect them to then all sorts of, services, from connecting them to English, where they can learn English, to calling, financial coaches who can talk to them about budgeting, basic budgeting, opening a bank account, how to look at your statement, because most of these women that come to Saheli have never managed money. Have never managed money because has been their husbands who have immigrated either first or have done all the paperwork. So they don't have a clue. How to open a bank account, what statement do you see, or even for women who are earning, many times they leave that work to the husband, the financial management, and when things fall apart, now suddenly they have to learn all of these things. So that is where, our support comes in. Which is, as I'm talking to you, I'm also amazed at how a small organization like Saheli, with all our volunteers and our 9 staff people, we manage to do all this work. But we do, and the numbers speak for themselves. Every year, we helped over 312 women last year.
Wow.
And so far this year, just till September end, we have helped 230 women, which is a huge number for an immigrant population.
But it's kind of scary at the same time. It's great that you've helped over 200 women, but at the same time, it's kind of scary that you needed to help.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's why the Awareness Month is needed.
Okay, I have backing up to earlier in the conversation, a couple of hopefully quick questions. Now, are you as an organization or as staff at that organization mandated? So what happens if a woman calls you and you know that they're in imminent danger? Can you call
Police.
the local authorities?
Yes.
And okay,
yes, we can. So if that person asks, like normally the cop needs, like they call her directly because it's better, because they know where she is. So if we call somebody, it becomes a little difficult because unless and until I say, you know, I'm helping and she's calling me and I know she's in danger, so then it's different. So if they have called police, then the DCF is anywhere involved. As Divya said, we start helping them with the DCF. So DCF never existed, and now we don't know. So that becomes an all, oh, they're going to take my kids away. No, they're not. It's just like, you know, this is a part of it, and then we are going to work with them because the language is again a problem. So it is the whole problem starts.
Which leads me to my next question: is the language, you know, is a question about language? Now, I think I need to attend your library sessions because my understanding is there's so many different languages and dialects in India, and if you're dealing with multiple countries and multiple dialects, how do you communicate with everybody that calls you?
We have we have a staff. We can speak a lot of languages. We have an Arabic speaking DV advocate. We have a Bengali speaking DV advocate. We have Gujarati. We have Punjabi and Hindi. So, and you know, we manage things. So it is working at the moment. Or we have some other volunteers. They can speak different languages.
Wow. Okay.
And the interesting thing is that even though there are many languages, there are primarily like the major languages that are spoken in India. So, for example, Hindi, Gujarati, Bengali, you know, southern, you know, Tamil, Telugu, and for example, Bengali is spoken in Bangladesh, and in India. So we are able to help women from Bangladesh. Urdu sounds similar to Hindi, so we can understand. I mean, we may not be able to read because the script is different, but we are able to understand the words, so we can communicate. Same with people from Nepal. Many of them speak Hindi, so we are able to communicate with them. For the Arabic speaking, you know, we are fortunate to have a domestic violence advocate who speaks different dialects of Arabic, and also French. Many of them speak French. Back to India, many of the people in the southern part of India, many people also speak, people who are from the southern part of India also speak English. May not speak it well, but we are able to communicate. And then we have a cadre of, you know, our volunteers, our trained volunteers who speak different languages. Our board speaks different languages. Advisory committee speaks different languages, and we are able to draw on those resources anytime we need language help.
Wow. Okay. Well, that answered my question.
That was too much information on languages.
No.
We can do another segment on that.
No, I really want, you know, wow, okay. So we started working, you know, I was looking at your website, which is a very good website, by the way, very comprehensive. So we talked about the helpline a little bit. Can we talk more about prevention? Because, you know, like you said, you've helped over 200 women this year alone, but other than raising awareness that this is an issue, how can we prevent that cycle?
And that's where our community education program comes in.
Okay.
Because we are a domestic violence intervention and prevention and response organization. Prevention is a big part of our work, and we all do it in many different ways. We have, you know, we have workshops around the year, and I would invite your listeners to go on SahiliBoston.org. You know, follow us on social media. We have very interesting workshops from, you know, how food influences, you know, your mood and how that can impact your, you know, how you know, so your trauma, and to healthy relationship workshops as to how you would, you know, communicate effectively. You know, parenting workshops that we hold, how you would parent effectively. So our goal is, so those are workshops that Sahili holds, and then we hold conversations with the community. We participate in community events. We are there, you know, we provide resources. We have a table, and you can come and talk to us, you know, learn more about domestic violence. And with the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, that is our goal also, to educate not just the South Asian community, but everyone, you know, in and around Burlington who comes for a walk about what is domestic violence, and
signs
how
to look for.
And you know, the bystander effect, and how you can help your neighbor if they are experiencing domestic violence, how to recognize the signs of domestic violence. You know, you know, and not to belabor the point, but if someone tells you, okay, you know, my my partner always wants to know the location I'm at, or always wants to have access to my phone, or does not allow me to go after 11 o'clock. No, there are some red flags there, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the relation. So I think the recognition of some of those things that are abusive for everyone, I think, is important. For not only for yourself, but for the people around you.
Okay, so if I was talking to you, for instance, and I heard some of these red flags, what should I do?
So you have to believe and be non-judgmental. I think those are the two main things. Because when we communicate, sometimes we listen to respond, right, instead of just listening. So what we can do is we can listen to the person. We can believe it when they say, because sometimes we try to brush it off. Oh, he's, because we may know their partner and say, oh, he's such a wonderful person. I'm sure he's trying to protect you, or he must be scared you're out late in the night, or he just, you're new to the country, right? Or if he's not giving her money, that he's trying to save for a home, whatever. We jump in with our own, observations. So just listening to the person, really understanding what they're going through, and then offering them resources. How can I help you? Finding out resources for them. Saheli, there are other domestic violence organizations. Can you talk to a social worker if their children, if they see something with their children? Every school has a social worker. So those are some of the things that they can do. When they know of someone, if they recognize red flags. And then Renu, I'm sure you can.
No, I totally answered already.
Keep going.
I will look for, she has already covered everything. So red flags, I think the most important is when they are telling, we normally like to listen. And sometimes they are telling what is they are experiencing. So without any bias feeling or anything, instead of just fixing the problem, it's better to listen. And then, giving the validating what she's feeling is true, and then working on that, like why she's feeling that. So because we never judging like that her feelings are wrong, because she's feeling that, and it is true, because otherwise you're not feeling. So we normally don't, talk about against like judging anything. So fixing the problem for her, it's more about what she feels and how we can make her feel easy that way. So, and it's her option, because she knows what is going on in her home. So we go with the flow, like what you want us to do. So if she's ready, yes, we have other options. If not, how can you, if you want to live, how can you do things better, differently? So we talk about safety planning again. This is, so that we start again, like, then safety planning is different. If she still wants to be, how can you stay healthy in a healthy relationship?
And we do get a lot of community referrals. So there are, people are reaching out to their friends, extended family members, and the people who know about Saheli will often refer them to us. We know of some people who have, sneaked Saheli's card into their bag, or a Saheli brochure into their bag, or have brought Saheli conversation, or have brought them to our Saheli event, our gala or our workshop. And many times they will call after those events, sometimes they say they sign up as volunteers, and they say, okay, I want to volunteer. And then when they start talking to us, then they disclose that this is what we are going through. So, we want to, for us, our goal is to create a safe space for any survivor to come and talk about what they're going through. And I would urge every listener to also think about it and create that safe space to their family and friends, so they can come to you and talk about if they're experiencing violence, and get a support and from you.
Can we talk a little bit more about the support groups? Because you had mentioned that you have
support groups. Yes,
different.
So we just started a Muslim support group, Muslim women support group. So we created a safe place, as Divya said, a safe place where women can come, Muslim women can come together and talk about their problems, what they're suffering. It's in a community. It's not only for our clients. So they have just started with the different topics, which is very normal, like for a woman talking about the topics, and then they talk, and then they start feeling like, okay, this is not right. I need more help in this. So then they can talk to us later on. But in the support groups are more like everybody, women can support each other talking, and they have some solutions for each other. sometimes they will say like, okay, I'm feeling my mother-in-law is putting too much pressure on me for this and that. So how should I? Then the women who are there, they'll start helping each other. It's just more like a support group.
Okay.
It's not for us just to educate them. It's more about
you provide them the safe space
and bring up a topic, and we talk on those topics.
Okay.
So then they start.
Do you ever get off topic?
Yeah, sometimes
I do all the time.
But sometimes they do, but we normally try to pull them back here.
Okay.
So we do that.
And how big are these support groups? I mean, how many?
So it depends from different support groups. And then this is a community one. Sometimes it's bigger. When we have our own, like for our survivors, then it is a little smaller, and then we just pick up the topics which is relevant for them. Okay. And like, what is the impact of domestic violence if you're going from trauma? What is the trauma? What is the side effects of it? So we talk about that, how to handle, how can you have a better communication with your children, because even the children are impacted and you are impacted. So how can you have without your own pain or trauma than the child? So how can you talk to each other or communicate in a good way? So we do those type of domestic support groups.
Oh, wow.
And it's an opportunity to not feel alone.
Yes.
So that you think, like with anything, any traumatic event that you're going through, that you don't feel that I'm the only one who's going through
that
this.
isolation.
You see other people who are going through different, they may be in different path on this journey, but you see them and it gives you hope.
Yeah.
That there is a path out, I have the support of these women. It is very, very crucial, especially for immigrant survivors that we serve, because for them there's no other space. They cannot join, any other organization, because most of them are run in English. They may not understand the culture. So the Saheli support group becomes really a place where they can talk about a culture. Mother-in-law issues. It's like as soon as the moment this week say mother-in-law, all the other members will understand what they are saying, right? Because most of them have gone through that experience, and that creates that bonding and that sense of. Okay, I'm not alone in this journey, that I can overcome this.
Cool. Now, what you just kind of mentioned the English language barrier, but with all those other languages that we talked about a few minutes ago, how are those language barriers overcome in these support groups?
So it depends, like, we have an Arabic support group, separate.
Okay.
So we only speak Arabic there. That's
okay.
different.
So
group. Then we have in a Muslim, as I said, like they normally have in Hindi, Urdu in English. That's what they do, and then we have in English. Whoever. So we
but
and
we,
then go with
so,
Hindi.
so there's lots of little support groups around.
But we do have our domestic violence advocates who offer translation
if needed.
If needed.
So they kind of facilitate their presence. So.
It is there.
Now, can you tell me more about the youth engagement program?
Yeah, I'm very happy to talk about our youth program.
Yeah, of course.
Great.
So we have been working with the youth. We actually had we did a project with Watertown School where we were trying to reach very conservative families that were from northwest part of Pakistan, from Afghanistan. Where there was early marriage, and girls were kind of not going to college. So we had a project with them, in terms of education, reaching out to the parents, educating them too about the opportunities here. And so we've been working with youth for a long time. But in the last 2 years, what we have realized is that just as the survivors need a safe space to come and meet others and speak about issues, same safe space is needed by second generation immigrant youth. So they may have been raised here, they were born here, raised here, gone to high school here, graduated here, are in college here, but they are straddling two cultures. So they're straddling the American culture, they're straddling their ethnic culture, which can lead to intergenerational communication problems. There are many social norms that they may have to observe, which are not, which puts them in awkward situation with their peers in high school, things like that,
internal struggle.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay, I want to do this, but my culture's pulling me. family wants me to do this. Wow.
Like, for example, early marriage, right? So your family may be pressurizing you for early marriage. You may be witnessing domestic violence within your homes where they are not seeking help, and you don't know, you're living with that trauma, right? So we realized that they needed a safe place to come together, and we started a youth fellowship program, and our goal is to reach younger youth, in the sense high school students, where we would do kind of, regular monthly workshops on healthy relationships and talk about all these issues, communication, consent, peer pressure, and
now, is this both genders
yes.
that you're working with?
Yes,
Just,
so this is both boys and girls. And we actually had we culminated our youth fellowship program with a very successful mental health conference, because that was, with COVID and everything, that was one of the issues they wanted to talk about. So our goal is that we keep doing these fellowship programs and have a conference at the end of, their workshop period. So we are really systematizing this program, and then we also build relationships with student organizations throughout campuses in Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
So we have, the South Asian associations, and from Harvard to, UMass Amherst to Northeastern. We build relationships, and they invite us to talk to their members and, kind of build relationships. So for all the young people, in your audience who want to join, go on our website and sign up to be a youth fellow. You can sign up to be a youth ambassador, or you can be
what's
a
youth ambassador?
So youth ambassadors are a social, South Asian Students Association. So they become ambassadors for domestic violence for Saheli work on their campuses to raise awareness about, many of the issues that we talk about.
Wow.
Okay. This is
this is part of our overall prevention.
This is prevention.
Part of
you
prevention.
were asking that question before.
Now, again, this is just my cultural ignorance, but you were talking about early marriages. Is there still a cultural practice of arranged marriages?
Yes.
And how does that impact domestic issues?
So, arranged marriages are very common in South Asia and Middle East. Not all arranged marriages are bad, right? I mean, there are
if
people
they were,
make it
you
work.
probably, the culture would probably eventually get rid of them.
But problems arise when one party is not willing. Right? Or may not be interested, or wrong people marry. There's so many myriad reasons. We can talk at length about how that can kind of engender domestic violence. For the children who are raised here, there is an expectation to kind of marry within your social status, within your own community. And I think it also stems from holding on to your culture a little bit, so that you don't bleed away everything that makes you unique. So you want to kind of retain that that uniqueness, that individuality, your culture. So there may be pressure on the children to have arranged marriages. But when they are educated, they go to college and they start working. It may not happen as much. They choose their partners. Many cases, very conservative families, in order to avoid that kind of independent thinking, they may encourage or they may put into practice early marriages. So then the goal is that, if we marry them off by 15, 16, 18, they're too young to be independent, and then we can marry them to someone from our own community, and that ways we'll have our ethnic and our culture, we'll preserve that. So it happens in conservative families, it happens in conservative parts of the countries that they come from. Doesn't happen to everyone, and not all marriages would lead to
domestic
violence.
I
didn't mean to, but 15 years old. Oh wow.
In this country it was not possible, but it's like in the other countries it happens.
Well,
actually in the US there is no legal age for marriage in many states.
No,
I was so surprised. I was so surprised to hear that, because there are 15-year-old, 13-year-old getting married.
That's just
and not South Asian, but women, girl children are getting married. They're in many states.
Okay, we are almost out of time, but I do know that you have a big fundraiser coming up in December?
Yes.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So we are calling it the Art Affair, and it's going to be art and wine event.
Ooh.
You know, we are an exclusive event where we will showcase art of that people have, you know, donated to us from artists, you know, from South Asia, from Middle East, and from our survivors. So from Saheli survivors, some of them will, you know, those who are artists and their children, we will showcase their art. The goal is for people to become aware of the artists that are, you know, that are coming from these immigrant communities, and to, you know, educate them about domestic violence, of course, and to really showcase, you know, art is the purest form of freedom, of expression of freedom, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we want to showcase about these survivors, you know, that freedom, that expression of freedom, you know, hope and optimism. So we will, you know, we will portray some of those art. And the reason we have the fundraiser is, as a non-profit organization, you know, tasked, and we've talked about our work and you know how much we are
Well,
doing.
you're talking about, you know, paying for somebody's housing for a year. I'm like,
We
wow.
have to do a lot more than that.
So we have to, you know, so we have to raise funds for all the vital work that we do with the survivors. You know, what we really are talking about is putting together a person life, putting back together a person's life, right? So it needs a lot of resources and support, and we are grateful to all the support we have from our community, and that's what we hope that we can get from our art affair. It's on December 5th from 4 to 8 in the evening at the Burlington Marriott, right here down the road, and we hope that and there'll be wine. And there'll be gifts, and we do hope
Wine and art. What more could you ask for?
And you know, programs and entertainment, and you know, speakers and comedians. So we have like a whole evening planned.
Oh wow!
It's going to be fun and educational and entertaining, and we do hope that we get a lot of turnout. People come, and then we can raise funds for our next cycle next year.
Off
Yes.
as well?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, yes.
So it's an art auction and entertainment.
Yes. And then wine and a food. Yeah. So
Now, how would someone go about volunteering for Sahili?
So we are so grateful to all our volunteers. You know, the task is immense. We would not be able to do
without them,
all of the things that we need to do without the help of volunteers. We're always looking for new volunteers. So best is to sign up on our website. There's, you know, if you go to saliboston.org, and if you go on volunteer, there's a tab called Get Involved. If they click on it, it says volunteer. You can just fill up the form. We contact you. We hold monthly or at least once in 2 months, we hold a volunteer orientation. It's a virtual, so anyone can join from wherever they are, where we go through our work, because many of them really don't know
what we do.
in detail about the work
And also
we do.
where, you know, where your skill sets are
would-
needed
exactly
within the organization.
what they are interested in, you
Yes.
know. So
Okay.
that's the thing.
Yes. And they can always write at info.saheliboston.org if they're interested in volunteering.
Cool.
Yeah. And we will need a lot of volunteers for our art affair. So, you
Yeah.
know, thank you
You
for
get a
asking that
preview of all
question.
the art. Excellent. Well, Renu and Divya, thank you so much for joining, but we are out of time. So glad to, and yes, we still have questions, so we might have to do a sequel. Thank you so much. I do appreciate your work, and I have a new appreciation for it after listening to you. So thank you very much for tuning in, or for being here. And I want to thank everyone at home for tuning in. And hopefully you are also inspired based on our conversation. And hopefully we'll see you at the 5K and see you around town.
And the art affair.
Okay.
Thank you
Have a
so
great
much
day.
for inviting us. We are very grateful to talk about our